Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. We are going to be talking today about compassion, and we're not in church. I like the topic of this event is Be Extraordinary, and I hate to say the word guarantee, but if you incorporate compassion into your life and self-compassion, you will be extraordinary. It is a very exciting and emerging field being studied by social scientists all over the country and all over the world. Stanford, UC Berkeley, Emory University, things are constantly changing. We're learning more and more information about compassion, its effects on us psychologically and physically. So today I'm going to gear the topic to self-compassion, primarily because we're dealing with seniors. And a lot of you, I think, probably work with seniors. And I was going to ask, how many of you work directly with seniors as a caregiver? Okay, great. All right, so that's the majority. All right, so that's basically what my talk is geared to today. I just wanted to be sure we were going to address what people's issues in their lives are. Normally I walk around, so I can't walk around today, so it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. So if I kind of get antsy, it's because I don't have a mic to walk. So you'll have to forgive me for that. So we are, the topic is alleviate and prevent burnout, right? Everyone, let's face it, our modern life, everyone experiences some stress that rises to the level of burnout. There's a particular type of burnout that people in the healthcare field and those that deal with seniors experience, and that is called compassion fatigue. So I came to this as a result of being a caregiver for my husband. He died of Lou Gehrig's disease, a while ago, but I was a full-time caregiver to him for 3 years. I've been a caregiver to my mom now, who has dementia, for a number of years. So I have some personal experience with this. Part of why I became interested in the science of compassion, it seems a bit odd for a lawyer, right? Because although we may experience burnout, it isn't because we have a great deal of compassion for the people that we're dealing with. So I came to this as a result of my experiences caring for my husband. I had 4 young children. And the experience of the community to what we were going through, I'm sorry, I hope I don't cry, was less than stellar. So I was pretty bitter and angry for a number of years because I didn't feel like we'd got much support or much compassion from the people, especially when it came to my kids in school. I mean, they were told they were troublemakers, they were stupid, all this because they were acting out a lot of their pain and grief. Because we took care of my husband at home, he died at home. So part of the healing for me was to start seeing other people compassionately, right? And to have self-compassion for myself. Because as we know, as caregivers, whether it's professionally or as a family member, there is no perfect caregiver, even though we think there is, right? We measure ourselves against the perfect caregiver, but that he or she does not really exist. And so part of what we do with self-compassion is release that idea of the perfect caregiver, and we'll go into that more in detail. This is just kind of an introduction. There's so much more to this topic, and it's so fascinating. I'm going to give you a brief introduction and a couple of tools to help you, but there is, like I said, it's a changing field, it's a vast field. I think it's a fascinating field because I think it can have a huge impact on our own lives and the lives of the people around us, and really, if we live compassionately, we can change the world. So I'm going to go to my next slide. So if you're in the healthcare industry or taking care of seniors, and I actually have a law practice now where I help seniors. So I deal with this daily myself as well. So in addition to consulting and speaking, I have a law practice. And so a lot of my clients have dementia. Of course, they have health issues and emotional issues. There's a whole bunch that goes with that. So I live this daily as well. Basically, when you focus a lot of energy on taking care of other people, you take on, that's part of being compassionate, right? You wouldn't be here if you weren't already compassionate people, because you would have picked another field. You would have been a lawyer or an accountant or something where you don't have to engage that part of your emotions. So if you're here already, you're compassionate. So we don't really need to go into what it means to be compassionate. You all already are. What we need to talk about is your lack of being compassionate with yourselves, right? Because when you are a very compassionate person, you tend to put all your needs on the back burner, right? You become, when you are compassionate, you really want to connect with the people that you're caring for. You want to engage them. You want to make them feel better. You want to make them feel supported, and that's wonderful, but that can be draining, right? Because you are giving a lot of yourself to them and not necessarily being replenished. Because a lot of the people we deal with as seniors, right, they're not in a position physically or emotionally to necessarily give back to us. So you're going to have to get your nurturance and your self-compassion someplace else. So you, in this field, you can tend to give and give and give and not get a lot back, at least when you are caregiving. And when you do that, it's considered to be compassion fatigue, right? You have pretty much drained your batteries. And the problem with compassion fatigue is that it can lead to a whole host of problems, psychological and physical for you, right? You can become depressed. You can have a decreased job satisfaction, you can feel worthless, it can start affecting your personal relationships with other people in your life outside of your work, and basically get into a downward spiral. And that's what they consider to be secondary stress or a burnout, compassion fatigue. So the remedy of that, and I know there's a lot of people that talk about self-care, you know, I don't know, go get a massage, go to a movie you like, you know, and those things are important, but this is very different from that. This is a whole different way of treating yourself and seeing yourself that is going to have a huge impact, if you can incorporate it into your life, on your ability not only to nurture yourself, but to be a better caregiver. So, compassion. Again, I think we kind of all think it's relegated to the church. It's you know, it's kind of nice, but you know, we don't really need it. That's absolutely untrue. The research is establishing that it's an integral part of our lives. If we are to thrive, and if we are even to survive, we need to be compassionate. We are not designed to be survival of the fittest, as we've kind of the current thinking. We are designed to be caregivers and to be socially connected to each other. I mean, we started out forming communities. Some of the social scientists say it arose as a result of our, you know, we have very vulnerable young, right? We need to form communities to raise this vulnerable young, and that's how we started to form communities, and that's how we started to survive better, right, and to thrive as a species. So when we hear survival of the fittest, that's actually absolutely wrong. That is not the way we are biologically programmed. We are biologically programmed to connect with others. And that is one of our deepest needs, is to connect with other people on a meaningful level. And that is what compassion does. Compassion is one of the key ways that we can achieve meaningful connections with other people. And that is the core and the key to our happiness and our success in every area of our life, whether you're professionally, family, community, education, I don't care what it is, it's a key. Leaders who are compassionate are the most successful leaders. So it is a core, it's at our core. So what is compassion? Compassion is that, remember, the social scientists want to study this, so they have to define it so that everybody that does these studies has some measurement by which they can conduct their studies. So compassion is when you see someone in distress. They say suffering, but that's a bit of a strong term. It's when you see somebody in distress or somebody who needs help, right? But then you want to help them. You take action to help them. And that's what differentiates compassion from, say, empathy. Empathy is hugely important, but typically that's when we identify with how somebody feels, right? But compassion goes a step further. We want to help that person, and we actually take steps to help that person. So we have to think of this in again, like I was saying, broadly. It's not touchy-feely, I can do without it in my life. We need this in our lives if we are going to survive and we are going to thrive. So start to think of it outside of, it's a core component of most organized religions, right? I mean, but it's much broader than that, and that's what the social scientists have been studying. It is a key element of our life. So we have two types of compassion. We have the compassion for others, which you all experience when you take care of or care for, our caregivers, whether it's in a professional capacity or a personal capacity as a family caregiver. And then we have self-compassion, right? Self-compassion is just compassion directed toward ourselves. So it's important because it helps us heal, because we all, at some level have experienced hurts in our lives, whether it's past hurts or current hurts. And compassion toward ourselves helps us heal those hurts by acknowledging them and bringing them to light and engaging in some practices that we can do for ourselves that'll help us heal that hurt. So I think self-compassion is probably the beginning point in starting leading a compassionate life, at least if you want to, certainly if you want to avoid secondary stress or compassion fatigue. All right, so why do we care about it? Other than, what I've told you, there is a huge mind-body connection. And a lot of researchers have uncovered this on a lot of fields, but these social scientists and psychologists that have been studying studying compassion have found that how we feel, if you feel compassionately or if you don't feel compassionately, that's manifested physically in your body. So that's why we're saying there's no longer, you think of it as an emotion over here that doesn't really affect our health over here. It doesn't. We are innately connected. So what you experience and how you react to your emotion is going to be manifested in your body in terms of improving your health and many other ways that we'll talk about. It's a fascinating subject. As you can see, it says these positive emotions, compassion, and there's a lot of emotions that accompany it, gratitude, a lot of things that go along with being compassionate, but those create a sense of well-being, right? And they can actually increase your longevity. It's one of the things that it does. And it does create success in every area of our lives. Some of the social scientists have said that a lack of social connection is a greater risk to your health than obesity and smoking. So it's huge. And in the senior population who become increasingly isolated, it's even more important to their health, their physical, emotional well-being, and of course their longevity. All right, there's 3 elements. So this has actually been studied. The social scientist that has done the most to promote this, and I guess first coined the term self-compassion, is a Dr. Kristen Neff, and she's a professor at the University of Texas, Austin. So she has identified 3 elements of self-compassion. One is the self-kindness, right? We want to be gentle and kind to ourselves. We comfort ourselves. This is the exact opposite, I think, of what a lot of us do with the self-criticism, right? I mean, sometimes you don't even realize you're playing that tape in your head. Oh boy, that was stupid. Oh, that was dumb. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, I should have done this. That's so the opposite of self-compassion. The negative self-criticism and the negative talk we engage in. I mean, sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it till I'm into it about 5 minutes. So part of this is being kind to yourself, right? Getting out of the judgment and the way that we criticize ourselves when we make mistakes or when we feel we fall short of whatever that standard is that we've set for ourselves. Whether it's in your personal relationships, in your professional life, whatever it may be. So part of it is too, then, so you're kind to yourself, a part of keep it in perspective, right? Sometimes when we are in a difficult situation or we're feeling upset, we can feel like this is the end of the world, or we're the only person that's gone through this, or this is never going to end, or this is some punishment for something I've done. The idea of saying that it's a recognition of our common humanity is that helps you keep perspective on it, right? Other people have gone through this. Other people have survived this. Other people have flourished. Other people are currently going through this. Those types of things. This too shall pass. Instead of getting into that kind of downward spiral, you want to open up the way you see things and embrace it as just part of life, right? This is just what happens in life sometimes. And then mindfulness. So I think a big part of what we tend to do too, and when you are caregivers, is we stuff our emotions down, right? Especially if you're caring for someone, you can't let your distress at the time come to the surface, right? Because you obviously don't want the person you're caring for to see you're distressed. And so we stuff those down, and one of the parts of this is to be mindful of how you feel, right? Even if you can't do it at that moment, how are you feeling at a particular time? Acknowledge that. Be mindful of how you're feeling rather than stuffing it down, so that when you're mindful of it, you can actually deal with it, right? Just acknowledging it is powerful. So you want to be mindful of what you're doing and how you're feeling, and hold that in, your awareness rather than stuffing it down. And those are the 3 parts of that. And of course, when you don't ignore your emotions, that's part of it. But you also don't want to be judgmental toward them, right? I mean, let's face it, emotions aren't right or wrong. They're just an emotion. We tend to judge them, but try not to. That's part of what mindful is too. You see your emotion without judgment, right? This is just how I'm feeling today. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just how I feel. So those are the 3 parts, the 3 elements of self-compassion. And these will be incorporated. We'll talk later about some practices, simple practices, because I know you guys are all really busy. Some simple things you can do, and then obviously, like I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more practices, but we'll talk about how to incorporate some of these into some practices. I did upload some handouts on the website. So if you can look at those are some of the practices, but I'll go over them a little bit with you today. But they will incorporate these 3 elements of self-compassion. And again, this is scientifically based. They've come up with these after studying people, and they've found that when people do these 3 things, it really makes a huge difference in their productivity and how they feel about themselves, their psychological health, their physical health. When you can practice these. So it has huge physical and psychological health benefits, right? If you are self-compassionate, people who are self-compassionate are going to feel more energized. And again, these are all based on studies that the social scientists have done. You're happy, you're grateful, you feel that you're of service, you're doing a good job. That energizes you. You're making a difference in the world. It puts you in the optimal frame of mind to help others. And then we're going to talk about the physical benefits. So the psychological benefits are right. It helps relieve depression. It helps relieve anxiety. There's physical benefits as well through the mind-body connection. So practicing compassion actually strengthens our immune system. It helps us recover from disease faster. It increases our longevity. It reduces levels of cellular inflammation, and we know that cellular inflammation are at the source of many diseases, including types of cancer. I think a lot of the autoimmune diseases are the result of cellular inflammation. And then it reduces your heart rate and blood pressure. So we have a vagus nerve that runs through our body, and that controls a lot of things in our system, including our heart rate and our blood pressure. And when that's stimulated, our heart rate and our blood pressure are reduced. And they have discovered that engaging in compassionate acts actually stimulates your vagus nerve and reduces your heart rate. There's also, I was just reading about, rheumatoid arthritis is obviously an inflammatory disease, and sadly my sister suffers from it, so I try to read up on it. Yes?
You have those sources in the last slide, and maybe it was you just indented them, but it looked like the 2 sources were under UC Berkeley, and my question is, are they separate like with the Stanford Center? Is it Stanford, like Stanford University, or are they under UC Berkeley?
No, they're 2 different. So UC Berkeley has Stanford has the Center for Care and Altruism. UC Berkeley has the Greater Good Science Center. And I'll have a list of references at the back, and I'm happy to share that. But those are, and there's other universities too. I just put those 2 on there because, we're in California and everybody's intimately familiar with those. So, rheumatoid arthritis. So apparently in Europe, they've started a therapy for that where they actually implant a device in people's body that stimulates their vagus nerve and reduces inflammation. And that's the same thing that compassion does. So it's apparent. We don't have it here in the States yet, but they're talking about incorporating for rheumatoid arthritis and other inflammatory diseases. But again, living compassionately, acting compassionately does the same thing. This is what we just talked about. You're less likely to be depressed or stressed. You're more likely to be happy. We talked about you soothe pain. When you soothe your own pain, you tap into your evolutionary system. And that's why it feels so good when you connect with others, when we soothe ourselves, because you're tapping into our deepest human need. All right, so we're talking about, so also when you act compassionately, you release oxytocin, right? And oxytocin they call is the love hormone. So that's released during breastfeeding, during sex, during any kind of really, activity that is pleasurable. And when you are acting compassionately, whether it's towards yourself or towards someone else, you are releasing oxytocin, right? When you engage in self-criticism, which we know you don't want to do if you're going to be self-compassionate, you are doing the opposite, right? You are releasing the cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and you are detrimentally affecting your immune system. So oxytocin helps your immune system in a lot of other ways too. Cortisol damages it, and the self-criticism we engage in when we're not self-compassionate releases the cortisol, and that creates some health issues for us. I mean, those are at the source of a lot of the autoimmune diseases, living in a constant level of stress. And the constant release or constant presence of cortisol is partly what damages your immune system, among other things. So, talk about a few simple self-compassion practices, right? This is one of the ones that I put on the website. So touch is very powerful, right? That is the principal way that we comfort ourselves and we comfort other people as well, right? Whenever you have a baby, how do you soothe them? You don't let them sit in the crib and whisper to them, right? You're going to pick them up, you're going to cradle them, you're going to stroke them. It's not really any different for us as adults, right? That's how, as far as people that you care for, touch is very important as a caregiver. You can use 1,000 words, but touch sometimes is much more powerful than saying things, comforting things. So it's true for ourselves too. If we want to be compassionate with ourselves, we would want to give ourselves a hug. I know it seems kind of weird. And if you're very distressed and there are people around, you can always try to do it discreetly or go somewhere else. But it's very powerful. Just, wrapping your arms around each other as this little girl is and giving yourself a hug has huge benefits for you, psychological and physical, right? It releases oxytocin, among other things. It's very soothing. So that's one of the simple ways that you can comfort yourselves. And again, this is the self-kindness part of self-compassion, right? You're going to be kind to yourself. You're upset. You're not going to criticize yourself or judge yourself. You're going to offer yourself some comfort, just like you would to a best friend, right? If your best friend is upset, you tell them, well, that was a stupid thing to do. You're an idiot, and why did you do that? No, you want to say something nice to them. You want to comfort them. Why is it any different for ourselves? We don't offer that same kindness to ourselves. I don't know whether it's cultural, the way we were raised. I know I had a very critical mother, and I can just feel those messages being replayed in my head constantly. So when you start to feel that with yourself, think about, what would I say to my best friend if she was feeling this right now? And then offer that to yourselves. Give yourself a hug. It's going to be amazing, the effect. And that's a very simple, I've tried for the purposes of this talk to pick some very simple techniques that you can start with to get yourself down this path, and then there's more and more things that you can do that will help you further, but these are just ways. See how they work for you. See if you like them, see if they make you feel better, and then I encourage you, to do more. You can contact me, you can do some more research on the internet, whatever it may be, to try to incorporate more of this into your life. And also, remember, if you're compassionate with yourself, you're more likely to be compassionate with other people, right? You're not experiencing compassion fatigue, you're not being burned out, right? You have been nurtured, and it's going to be easier for you to nurture other people, because when you're not nurtured, you're depressed, you're anxious, right? You're impatient. And so part of the purpose of this is that you're going to be able to be more compassionate with the people that you're caring for in any area of your life, not even professionally. So one thing they've talked about in terms of developing compassion is the loving kindness meditation. They've done a lot of research on this, and this is actually derived from Buddhism. Meditation is actually one of the tools that they use to help people become compassionate. People can be trained to be compassionate. They're starting to incorporate it into schools, compassion curriculum, and they have compassion training for people, adults. because it is something that very malleable. We can't, even if you grow up in a household where you don't have self-compassion or you aren't raised compassionately and you have a lot of criticism, there are things that you can do to change that in your life and in yourself. So if you're not feeling, that well, I don't know, this is just the way I was, by doing some of these simple tools even, you can start changing those messages for yourselves and also the messages that you pass on to other people. Compassion is contagious, hugely contagious. So if you're compassionate, everybody else around you is going to be too. That's just the way it is. So you can see, so loving kindness can be something simple. I like to do simple things because we're all busy, right? Loving kindness, and I have a whole handout on it, is basically at some point in the day, and I think people get overwhelmed when they think of meditation and, oh my gosh, how am I going to have time to do all this stuff? Sometimes I just do it when I'm driving in the car. I just turn the radio off, or if I'm sitting waiting an appointment. It's basically just thinking in a loving way about other people and about yourself, right? You can pick specific people, you can say the world, you'll include yourself in that, and they found that it has huge benefits in terms of becoming more compassionate and more self-compassionate. And it does not have to be difficult. Meditation, they have done some studies, and it has been shown to actually alter the brain chemistry long after you're meditating, not just while you're meditating. It has huge effects, positive effects on the brain. And when we think of meditation, I always think, oh my gosh, who has 30 minutes to go sit cross-legged on a cushion, right? And, think about whatever we're supposed to think about. That's really, it doesn't have to be that difficult. It can be something, like I said, as simple as doing that. And believe me, your mind is going to wander. People think, oh, I'm not doing it right because my mind is wandering. I can't turn my mind off. I don't know how many of us really can. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do that, but you are still getting huge benefits from it if you can't turn your mind off. You will as time goes on, but just the idea that you're focusing on some of these other things has huge benefits for you. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a lot of time, or if you feel like your mind is driving you crazy. It's kind of like exercise for your mind, like we exercise our body, right? It's important to exercise your mind in these kinds of ways and to create these positive benefits. So, and this is really, it reduces your stress immune response when you do it regularly, right? And it lowers your depression and increases your capacity for compassion. And again, one of the key reasons compassion is so important is because it's one of the principal ways we connect with others in meaningful ways. And the connection with others is really what drives us, what keeps us healthy. So this is a principal way to do it. All right. Mindfulness, that's another one that kind of scares everybody. What does that mean to live mindfully? You're kind of like, oh, do I have to, go in the yoga position? What do I have to do that? Again, it just means being aware of what's going on with you, right? Living in the moment. We have like a million things on our to-do list, right? I mean, we're never focused on what we're doing at the exact moment. I know I can be doing something I've actually forgotten I've done it because I'm worried about my next 10 tasks I'm going to get done. The idea of this is to just be present with what is going on with you at the moment. Focus on that. Don't be preoccupied. And again, this can you can be mindful. You can find out, wow, once I pay attention to what I'm thinking, I've just been judging and criticizing myself for the last 5 or 10 minutes. You may not even been aware of it. You're so conditioned to do it. So be mindful as to what you're saying to yourself, how you're feeling, what's going on. Even labeling your emotions helps you deal with them. So when we're mindful, we are aware of what's going on with ourselves, externally and internally as well. What am I feeling right now? That's a way you can be mindful. Again, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes of, oh, I got to be mindful now. If you start feeling yourself getting upset, what am I feeling now? Right? You can label it. That helps you deal with it. That helps it from controlling you, right? You now know what it is. You can deal with it because you've labeled it, and we're not acting out in unhealthy ways because we kind of know why we're feeling what we're feeling and maybe why we're feeling it. Again, no judgment or criticism in mindfulness. It's huge, and the benefits, if we practice self-compassion, there are huge benefits for the people we're caring for. Again, compassion is contagious, but they've done a lot of studying because, compassion in healthcare is a very important subject these days. A lot of conferences and a lot of research has been done in offering compassionate healthcare. And one of the keys to that is being a compassionate caregiver, whether it's a nurse, a doctor, or therapist, whatever it may be, a family caregiver. It's important that when you deliver care with kindness and compassion, there are huge benefits for the people that you are caring for. So it reduces their anxiety and stress, as it does for you. Again, remember, these are cyclical, it's contagious. So if you're stressed out and anxious, chances are the person you're caring for is going to be feeling the same. If you are coming from a place of kindness and compassion, they're going to experience that as well, right? It speeds up recovery from a variety of health issues, including surgery. It reduces the amount of pain the patient experiences. They even did a study where they had some kind of procedure was being done on one of the partners in a marriage, and they just did some studies where the other spouse held the person's hand, and they found that neurologically that person experienced less pain. Now, of course, if they had a stronger connection to their spouse, there was even less pain. But there's a physical component to this. And so when you, they actually do physically experience less pain than when you actually touch them or when you offer it compassionately, offer care compassionately. Kindness and touch alter your heart rhythm and your brain function. So these are some huge things, and some of the tools that they say, aside from not being fatigued or burned out yourself, right? You're feeling pretty centered. You're not depressed and you're anxious. I think that's the key, but that's going to allow you more to listen actively to whoever you're caring for, right? To touch them compassionately, to connect with them, to validate them as a person. That's huge in caregiving. It's really huge in any part of life, right? But it's huge, and it has really recognizable effects, the measurable effects for you and for the person that you're caring. And as you can see, compassion is contagious. They have done studies on that. I've said that, but I don't know if I can say that enough. So this is a little bit about the touch. And this was a study done by at the UK about the different types of touch. And of course, the therapeutic touch is the one we're talking about that conveys compassion, emotion, support. And it's important in a patient-centered care and offering health care in a compassionate way. All right? Again, we talked about this. It's our most basic human need. Okay, I haven't talked about telomeres. This is another exciting subject. All right, what is a telomere? I don't know. I saw this. The scientist that discovered it is a very interesting lady. She got interested as a child in pond scum. Okay, whatever floats your boat, I guess. She got fascinated by pond scum. So she became a scientist, and she started studying pond scum, because apparently it doesn't go away. I don't know, I've never really studied pond scum, but apparently it doesn't go away, right? So she was fascinated, why does this stuff not disappear like other things do? So she started studying it, and she found out that there are telomeres, right? Including in people, we have telomeres. And telomeres, if you have longer telomeres, your cells are going to age more slowly, right? And they're going to be healthier. People have longer telomeres, live healthier, longer lives. So, and they are parts of the chromosome, and they actually measure this. So the telomere is something that's on the end of the chromosome, and they've actually measured this, and they've actually determined that if you have longer telomeres, you will lead a healthier, longer life. And interestingly enough, social connections have an effect on your telomeres. Now, some of the studies that they've done is about the level of social cohesion in neighborhoods, right? She's done some things where she says that people who live in neighborhoods where they feel safe, however that may be defined for the particular person, have greater, the people who live in neighborhoods that are less safe have greater cellular aging. So if you're in a neighborhood that's safe, you're gonna have longer telomeres, and you're gonna live healthier, and you're gonna live a longer life. If you feel unsafe, you're going to have shorter telomeres, and you're going to have a greater cellular aging, certainly in comparison to people that live in safe neighborhoods. Now, a lot of this is, when we're talking about social connections, it's different for each of us, right? We are individuals. Some people have to know 50 people, right, that they socialize with. Other people can have one or two. The idea is, how do you perceive the social connection? How do you feel connected to that person? How does that make you feel? So there's no specific standard. A lot of it's cultural, a lot of it is individual, but it is a part of who you are. So probably identifying what makes you feel good, what makes you feel connected is important, and making sure that you have whatever that need is in your life fulfilled. And for people with safe neighborhoods, that could mean knowing one neighbor, that can mean having block parties. It just depends on how you feel about that. There's no set standard on it. But this is an emerging field. They're doing a lot of, she's written a book about it, and they're doing a lot of research here on the telomeres, because it's very...
So how does the scum and the chromosome thing relate?
She started studying pond scum because she found that it didn't go away, and that's how she discovered telomeres. It's something to do with pond scum. I mean, I didn't read her paper, but yeah, she doesn't go into that. Well, you could probably read her book, and she'll go into it more scientifically. She doesn't. She talks about it. She actually has a TED Talk, and she doesn't get really scientific with it. So she just talks about that, starting her interest in it, and somehow by studying pond scum, she discovered telomeres, and there's also something called telomerase, which is a chemical in our system, okay, that has to do with telomeres. So, all right, so here's some references. I have a lot more if you're interested, and here's Elizabeth Blackburn is the one that's talking about the telomere effect that just came out last year. Very fascinating. You can find her on YouTube too. She talks about it a little bit. So as you can see, everything is changing in this field. That's a very recent discovery. They're coming out with studies and important information. This is just the tip of the iceberg, just a little bit of taste of what can happen. You can do, I also on the website, I put out the self-compassion break, okay? So self-compassion break is just a 5-minute break, and I list specific steps because I think it's, we need more guidance, especially in the beginning, right? This is what I need to do, this is what I need to do, and become a little more automatic. But basically, the self-compassion break incorporates those 3 elements, right? So you start out loving kindness towards yourself, right? You're going to see if you're doing any self-critical message. You're going to give yourself positive, loving messages. The second part is going to be that you're going to get some perspective on whatever's going on with you right now, right? This is part of the human experience. Other people have gone through this. This too shall pass. And then the third part is being mindful, right? You're going to be mindful in that moment about how you're feeling. And make sure that when you're mindful, whether you're angry, upset, hurt, you acknowledge that, you don't ignore it. Right, and then you'll be able to deal with it. And so the self-compassion break, which can be as short as 5 minutes if you're caring for someone and you feel like you're getting really over the edge, which I know caring for my husband there were times I just didn't think I could do it anymore. So it's good, you can just step outside for a minute and take a little 5-minute compassion break, and do them as often as you want, and they do build on each other. So the more you do that, the easier it becomes to do, the more the effects you will feel when you do that. We have love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. I think we need to change our thinking in this country. We think of them as luxuries, right? We don't really need them. But actually, they make you more successful in the business world as well. They make you a more successful leader. The effects permeate every aspect of your life. I think part of one reason the social scientists have become interested in studying this is because it seems that compassion is definitely on the decline in the American society. Fewer and fewer people are feeling connected. Fewer and fewer people have people in whom they can confide. I think they said in 2004, 25% of the people had no one in whom they could confide, and the majority only had 1 or 2 people. And that's becoming less, probably, that's 14 years ago, so I'm assuming it's less. We're definitely becoming a lonely culture, and loneliness has the opposite effect of compassion, right? You become depressed, you become anxious, you don't feel like you belong. A lot of, obviously they've discovered a lot of these people that engage in these random acts of violence are loners, they're lonely. So it's really important to have a compassionate society, and it all starts with us, right? We get so busy. Sometimes when I leave the office and I'm going to go meet with clients or I'm going to go out for the day, I stop myself and I remind myself that my goal today is not to accomplish the 30 things on my to-do list. My goal today is to be kind to everyone I meet. And I think of like putting on my compassion hat when I leave. And it's as simple as that, saying thank you, asking the clerk, cashier in the store, how are you, holding the door open for someone, thanking another driver. I mean, it doesn't have to be some earth-shattering crisis that someone is having. Just small acts of kindness and gratitude and compassion will have a huge effect. And we can change the world if we all do it. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate all your attention. I'm here for any other questions.